Welcome to today's lesson, number 29, which is in relation to LIMS, or Laboratory Information Management Systems, that are used in the regularly in the laboratories. The overview or the objectives of this lesson are to discuss the functional operations within the testing laboratory, as well as the operational workflow once the sample arrives into the laboratory, and managing that chain of custody or the workflow throughout the lab. I'm going to talk about the regulatory compliance standards and the QA, the quality standards, specifically the 21 CFR compliance. We'll discuss the need for laboratory automation and the benefits and advantages it brings, as well as the advantages of to quality assurance of implementing a LIMS system. So what is LIMS? And LIMS stands for Laboratory Information Management System. It's a computerized system that tracks and manages samples through a protocol. It's an interface for both laboratory personnel and instruments. It helps support high throughput operations. LIMS database applications are used to store and manage information associated with the laboratory, and they contain information such as testing of samples and the test results, the collection sites, or where the samples were taken from, where they were transported to, and where they were stored before, during, and after testing. LIMS will also contain details of your analysis methods or your procedures, and embedded within that we can also put things like the control limits or the acceptance criteria, for example the system suite criteria associated with the method, so that the LIMS reports can then flag if we have potential failing out to try and drive specification results. It also looks at control limits that are placed on the process. So if we get a trend where we're getting a drifting high or drifting low process data, it'll also flag that. LIMS also includes information like the tracking of the sample before once it's taken and sent to the laboratory. It does this through an integrated barcoding system where the sample is scanned between areas or between departments or functions. It's got a very sophisticated query searching icon which allows you to track where your sample is at any time or the status of that sample. It's got a very powerful instrument integration function, so we can integrate, say, a balance with a HPLC instrument, so that the weights will automatically get transferred from your balance of your samples and your standards or your controls. Once weighed, they'll get transported to the software that's used for the integration of your peaks, that will then automatically calculate results for you. It's got a very powerful audit trail, as well as a very powerful reporting functionality. So why implement a laboratory information management system within your manufacturing site? And I suppose one of the main reasons is to manage the vast amount of data or information that's generated in all areas of manufacturing, as well as in the sample analysis arena. So it allows for greater quality assurance over areas like good laboratory practice, as well as good manufacturing practice and good documentation practice throughout the life cycle of your sample. It hugely reduces the amount of data entry errors associated with manual entry of samples, also manual transcription of results from an instrument into, for example, an Excel spreadsheet or into a logbook or a notebook. And there is a greater need nowadays for faster turnaround of samples to reduce cost. So LIMS helps with this also. LIMS can help testing laboratories manage data, automate laboratory workflows, and meet regulatory guidelines and quality standards seamlessly. Some of the testing laboratories' responsibilities are listed below, and LIMS has some very powerful functions that allow the management of these particular responsibilities within the lab. So it can manage things like sample tracking, inventory management, so also things like your raw materials, as well as your solvents may be used for sample prep or reagents. They'll all contain a barcode that's scanned every time it's used, and that information then is tracked within the LIMS system. A very powerful data collection parameters, instrument management, so we can put on our instrument details or calibration records or instrument inventory on the LIMS system. It can flag when a calibration or routine maintenance is scheduled. Chain of custody of samples, again, resource management, so everything, all our electronic passwords are managed through the LIMS system, so personnel details can be recorded there, as well as data analysis through your reporting functions. So typically when a sample arrives into the testing laboratory, the first thing that happens is the sample is scanned in, and we call that sample collection. So the barcode is scanned and LIMS recognizes that it's been received into a certain area. The sample is then prepared as per your protocol or your procedure. Reagents are added then depending on how you prep your sample. Again, each one of those reagents are scanned through the LIMS system. Your instrument, whether it be a HPLC or GC or mass spec, whatever it may be, is prepared and made ready to receive your sample. The sample is then run and monitored on that system. That workflow generates data, which is collected through the LIMS system, which then generates a report. That report can be modified to flag out of specs or to flag potential failing results or out of trends. You can also look at your system suit criteria through the LIMS reports. Again, which once you input your acceptance criteria into those LIMS reports, it can flag passing or failing results. The results can be shared then interdepartmentally. Different departments can get access to the LIMS system depending on their access control, and they can view the reports on the system as they're generated. It can also look at how the sample is disposed, where it's disposed, the quantities disposed, as well as any retained samples that are taken and how they're stored and recorded. So the workflow is recorded, and the audit trail is maintained right from sample receipt to sample disposal. And really the main aim of a lab is, of a testing laboratory, is to generate test results that rely on two factors, one being precision of those results that come out of the laboratory, and to make sure that those results are error-free and reported in a timely manner. And LIMS can support both of these two factors. The quality assurance goals then, the quality assurance measures under any of the regulatory standards request that we have a standard operating procedure in place for testing and analysis of samples, as well as proper labelling of all reagents. The documentation and reporting system needs to be in place that's accurate and precise, and that's reported out in a timely manner. And of course, all your data is securely archived with an audit trail and easily retrieved during an audit, for example. So these are some of the requirements that quality assurance must comply with. And if a LIMS system is implemented on site, then it complies with all of these four factors listed. A LIMS, Laboratory Information Management System, covers standards such as the ISO 9000. So within that standard, it requires that management must define, implement, communicate and maintain quality objectives and assign personnel at all levels of the organisation to be responsible for verifying the company's quality system. Which the ISO 9000 primarily affects manufacturing laboratories, and the LIMS system covers this or supports this standard. The 21 CFR standard, specifically the electronic signatures and electronic records, which is listed here, it talks about the requirements around how you monitor and control electronic signatures. Again, LIMS has the functionality to be able to do this. That document we would have referenced in previous lessons, so please take a look through that when you can. LIMS also complies with GLP practices, as well as previously mentioned good documentation practices and good manufacturing practices. It also complies with the ISO or the IEC 17025 standard. So digging a little bit deeper into LIMS, we could ask how it works, and in very simple terms there's 5 steps or 5 phases involved. The first being the reception and login of sample data, assigning, scheduling and tracking of the sample data, followed by the processing and quality control associated with the sample and the utilised equipment and inventory to support the testing of the sample, the storage of data associated with the sample analysis, and finally the inspection, approval and compilation of the sample data for reporting and further analysis. Some of the challenges that we encounter routinely with managing data would be collecting large volumes of data routinely in the laboratory. So depending on how fast your batches are manufactured and the numbers that we sample and test in the laboratory, a huge amount of data needs to be managed after one particular run, for example. So that involves a huge manual workload. It involves a lot of transcription of data, both from sample prep into your logbooks or notebooks, as well as transcribing results from your outputs into maybe Excel spreadsheets or maybe into your logbooks or your notebooks. We normally transcribe equipment usage, balance usage, or any key piece of equipment that was used during sample prep, we transcribe that into our logbooks, as well as any reagent prep or sample prep or standard prep information. Again, that's all transcribed, which costs time really and money for the laboratory. So the consumption of time and human resources is just echoes that comment. We also have some data sharing concerns. So, how do we securely share the data once the information is obtained from the laboratory? How do we ensure that that data is secure and remains untampered, if you like, if it's shared through, for example, Excel spreadsheets that are non-validated. Data retrieval then can become difficult because the data is spread across several different logbooks, several different instruments, maybe different analysts were involved in the assay, so it's quite difficult to pull all that information together. And obviously there's regulatory compliance issues that we need to be aware of at all times when it comes to managing your data and ensuring compliance with these procedures. So the need for automation then would be to streamline these operations and minimize the costs associated with routine testing. Um, we need to think about improving our operational efficiencies, achieving accountability for our work, as well as establishing a standard workflow throughout. Um, Automation will ensure that we maintain our data integrity at all times, as well as adhering to regulatory guidelines. And it allows us to collaborate effectively, not only between departments within the company, but also departments external to your own, or other corporate companies that can share information as well off-site. So LIMS is involved in managing sample acquisitions, namely electronic data entry, robust functionality, sample traceability. It works through a unique identification system, barcode-based tracking of samples and reagents. It's got a comprehensive audit trail, so we can see where anything was changed and the reason for change. Very easy data retrieval, as well as integration and automation of equipment within the same laboratory. So managing test and result entry. So within the LIMS system, we can create a report that flags where we specify our ranges and configure flagging sets for each analyte. So we can have a high-low spec or an out-of-trend or out-of-specification range that's flagged in our reports. LIMS can create multiple customized reporting templates. So depending on where we're sharing the information and who we're sharing it with, we can customize our reports to uh, show additional information or hide information if we want. All of the reports are obviously authenticated with electronic sign-offs and signatures, both by the first person or the analyst performing the assay, as well as second person verification. It ensures a streamlined results entry system. It allows chain of custody to ensure reliability of reported results, and electronic records and signatures are created as the sample moves through the different stages of the testing workflow throughout the lab. So as previously mentioned, some of the QA and QC benefits are listed below. Some of the things we've talked about, we can track training records of employees. We can track instrument maintenance and calibration records. Importantly, we can look at a full audit trail and quality control charts. Check limits. We can schedule samples also through the LIMS system, and obviously we can customize our report systems too. Some of the advantages of implementing the LIMS system would be to manage complex workflows, to store and analyze different data sets from different instruments. It promotes multi-center collaboration, quick turnaround time with customized designed reports, real-time reporting, which becomes important, say, for in-process testing or process critical analysis or sterility testing. It allows device interfacing. Inventory consumption and reagent tracking is another important one. So we're more aware then of stock levels. Electronic signature and audit trails, as previously mentioned, are tracked through the LIMS system. More advantages include things like very fast report access and queries, reduction in paperwork, improved data quality, so reduction in errors or transcription errors, improved operational efficiencies, simple to use Excel-like formulas, increased productivity, productivity gains, so instrument interfacing and auto reporting, integration with other departments or other business systems, reduces transcription errors and avoids duplication of work. So what does the future hold for LIMS or for laboratory information systems? Some of the things that maybe are in the future is to have the LIMS system available on cloud, so there'll be no need then for companies or to purchase expensive servers. The hardware, obviously, and the IT resources then don't become an issue. We can also think about implementing LIMS with PC and Wi-Fi connections also, so they can be remotely accessed. So LIMS is starting to gain a lot more momentum in the manufacturing facilities because of the huge advantages that it brings with it. That's the last slide on LIMS systems, and thank you for listening.